loves me like you used to. Sometimes we're not ourselves. There's no one I can turn to. And I know all the feelings that we shared out in the past. And I know your relationships are never meant to last. And I'll take some time, but I'll be alright. We're moving on. We're moving on. I know times are tough, but I've had enough. We're moving on. We're moving on. We're moving on.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our chairman, Colin Mowat, our board of trustees, and the entire Bestmed team, I'd like to warmly welcome you to Bestmed's 2023 AGM, which is also the 59th AGM in our history. Thank you very much for investing your precious time to join us today. My name is Madeleine Barkhuizen, and I'm the Executive for Sales and Marketing at Bestmed. And with me here today, I have our presenters who I'd like to introduce to you as well. On my left-hand side is Colin Mowat, who is our chairman. Then we have Jasogan Chetty, who is our Chief Financial Officer, and Leo Dlamini, who is our Chief Executive Officer and Principal Officer. The three gentlemen will take us through the AGM agenda today. During the past few years, Bestmed has really solidified our personally yours service in the market, and we've now become one of the fastest growing and most financially sustainable medical schemes in South Africa. The past year has been challenging, as the presenters will also share with you, because we navigated through a post-COVID environment in which we did experience a change in our claims profiles and also members under financial pressure. But as a Bestmed team, we have a good and a positive story to tell, and we feel blessed to work for an organization that is growing in very challenging times. As we start today's AGM, we sincerely thank you for your support. You are the reason for our existence. The agenda for today is displayed on the screen, and it was also disseminated to members with the AGM notices. We've not received any requests for additional agenda items, and therefore the agenda for today remains unchanged, and it includes the following. After my introduction, our chairman, Colin Mowat, will commence with his presentation. This will include the minutes of the previous AGM that was held on 23 June 2022, as well as the motions in terms of Rule 26.1.4. Colin will also present the chairperson's report. Then Jasogan Chetty will present the financial statements and the auditor's report for the year ended 31 December 2022, and also the appointment of the auditors for the 2023 financial year. And then our CEO and Principal Officer, Leo Dlamini, will present the proposed increase in trustee remuneration for the 2023-2024 years. And then after the presentations, members will have the opportunity to vote. We'll announce the results and we will close the meeting. Just the house rules for today's virtual event. Your microphones are muted to ensure the smooth flow of the meeting today. There is a question and answer functionality on the platform, and we have employees that are available to address your questions. We've also made provision for voice questions, and we will indicate to you when the phone lines are open for the questions, and at that time we'll be able to allow 90 seconds per question. But during the presentations, you are also welcome to phone us. We will then record your questions and pose it to the presenters during the Q&A sessions. The telephone numbers are displayed on the screen. At this point, we want to kindly request that you please ensure that your questions relate to the AGM agenda today. If you have any other questions about membership, etc., those can be directed to the Bestmed team via our normal service channels. We've also made some documents available for you today. These are listed on the top left of your screen, and it includes the AGM agenda, the guideline document for streaming and voting for today, the highlights of the financial statements for the year ended 31 December 2022, the trustee remuneration policy that includes track changes, the trustee remuneration policy, the clean version, an explanatory note on the trustee remuneration proposal for 2023-2024, and then Bestmed's substantive rules. As I mentioned earlier, members will vote on agenda items after the presentations. Principal members would have logged on today after receiving an OTP or a one-time PIN, and this also allows you to vote. We'll open the voting section after the presentations, as I said, and then you'll have the opportunity to cast your vote for 3 items, after which the chairman will announce the results to all the members that are attending the AGM. So I just want to confirm that the voting will be done only after the agenda items have been announced and finalized. Kindly note that you will then have one opportunity to cast your vote. Once you've submitted your vote, you will not be able to change it or resubmit it. And once your vote was submitted successfully, you'll see the wordings, "Thank you, you have successfully submitted your vote." I will repeat this information just before the voting session as well. So this is an illustration of what the voting page will look like. The screen will confirm your name and membership details. The webcast screen will be at the center of your screen, and then you will click on the blue click to vote button as indicated on the screen, and when you click on that button, it will open the voting page and all your voting items will be listed there. Your AGM virtual meeting screen should look like the one displayed on the screen now. If you want to view today's meeting in full screen mode, just click on the small white square that is on the bottom right of your streaming view, and then you will be able to view the presentation in full screen mode as is displayed on the screen now. If you want to go to your previous view, just click on the white square again. If you experience any issues with your view, please click on the refresh button, which is the circle on the top left of your screen that is part of the address bar. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our opening and welcome, and I hope that you will be able to view the presentations today easily. And please remember, any issues, just click on the refresh. This concludes the welcoming and opening item, and I'll now hand over to our chairperson, Colin Mowat, to take you through the next 3 agenda items. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Madeleine, and good morning to you all. I hereby declare this meeting properly constituted, the members having been given adequate notice of the meeting in terms of Rule 26(1.1, and currently we have a quorum with 148 members logged in on the call. I can confirm that this is a virtual AGM being transmitted from a media studio. I can also confirm that all relative administrative matters, including the issuing of electronic ballot papers, have been finalized, and would like to reiterate what Madeleine said in her introduction, that only matters pertaining to the AGM will be attended to at this meeting. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to the members of the scheme, especially new members and those members that are joining us from around the country. Representatives of the corporate employers affiliated to Bestmed, members of the Board of Trustees, past chairpersons and trustees, Mr. Gordon Nzalo, chairperson of our Audit Committee, Mr. Kwena Mokatedi, the CMS representative, representatives from Deloitte, the scheme's external auditors, and finally, the Bestmed team. I can also confirm that we have not received any apologies for the meeting. Due to the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions that were in place during 2020 and 2021, the CMS approved that Bestmed's rules be revised to make provision for a virtual, physical or hybrid AGM. The 2020, 21 and 22 AGMs were all successfully hosted as virtual meetings, and it is important to note that the hosting of the AGM via a virtual meeting platform has also become an industry norm. The opportunity to include members nationally by means of the virtual platform remains a priority for the scheme, especially since more than 50% of our members are now located outside the Gauteng region. We also note the CMS's recently published Circular 21 of 2023 and support their request to hold the AGM via a meeting platform so as to attract a larger audience. For these reasons, the 2023 AGM is also presented as a virtual meeting. As Madeleine said up front, we have done our utmost for this meeting to run as smoothly as possible, and thank you for joining us virtually today. I would now like to finalize the agenda of the AGM. In terms of Rule 26(1)(4) of the Bestmed rules, no motions were received to be voted on at the AGM. Therefore, the AGM agenda is finalized as per the agenda that Madeleine presented in her presentation, and it's the same agenda that is in the meeting pack disseminated to members. I would now like to move on to the minutes from the previous annual general meeting held on the 23rd of June last year. The minutes of this meeting can be found on pages 11 to 21 of the highlights of the annual financial statements booklet that was made available to members in the meeting pack distributed. There are 3 matters arising from the minutes of the 2020 AGM to report back on. The first matter relates to Dr. Late's CMS complaint. At the meeting, Dr. Late inquired why his appeal hearing had been postponed without this being discussed with him and no alternate dates given. He would appreciate commitment from Bestmed to get a date for his appeal from the CMS. The complaint was raised via the CMS, and thus the terms and process of Dr. Late's appeal hearing are determined by the CMS. However, on the 28th of June, 5 days after last year's AGM, both Dr. Late and Bestmed were advised by the CMS that the appeal hearing would be heard on the 18th of August 2022. The second matter arising relates to the annual financial statements. The MC informed the meeting that questions on the annual financial statements received from Mr. D.M. Makela would be addressed directly with him after the AGM. The action taken as per the slide on the screen is that the CFO answered Mr. Malakela's questions on the financial statements telephonically directly after the AGM. The third matter arising was in respect of trustee remuneration. Mr. C.F. Murray suggested that the board should consider a differentiated payment based on the professional expertise of each trustee. The Medical Schemes Act, the King Code, and guidelines set by the CMS for trustee remuneration provide no guidance on a variable remuneration model for trustees. Board member remuneration is left with schemes to determine. Such determination must pass the test of transparency and fairness. While it is acceptable that skills and competencies may vary between board members, this is not intended to justify a differentiation in fees. Further considerations: the board is made up of both elected and appointed members. There is no qualification requirement in respect of elected members, and there would therefore be no justification to discriminate on this ground. Also, boards by their nature are expected to work and take decisions as a collective. Taking all of this into account, any decision to differentiate trustee remuneration would fall short of justification. As we received no correspondence from members requesting further clarification on or changes to the minutes by the deadline date, I will take these minutes as being a fair and true reflection of the 2022 AGM. Can I now request a member to propose and a second member to second the approval of these minutes using the proposer and seconder buttons shown on your webcast screen? Kindly note that before you can propose or second, you will have to refresh your screen by clicking the small round icon circle icon at the top left corner of your screen. Also, please note that the proposer and seconder buttons will automatically disappear once the members who are proposing and seconding the approval of the minutes have clicked on these buttons. I will now wait for a minute or so while we have members approve and second the minutes. We're still waiting for feedback from the technical team. Proposer, thank you, Mr. Van Zyl. Member number 386111. We're just waiting for a member to second the minutes. Still waiting for feedback from the technical team. Apologies for the delay. Please remember that if you do wish to second the minutes, you will need to first refresh your screen before seconding the minutes. We have a seconder, Mr. Varma. Member number 15785101. Thank you to the proposer and the seconder. These minutes will now be published and are made available to the CMS. That concludes agenda item 3, minutes of the previous AGM. I would now like to move on to agenda item number 4, the chairperson's report. The report is included in full in the highlights document that was emailed to members and is available on the website. I will cover some of the issues in that report here today. Despite increasing economic pressures and an industry-wide increase in claims post the COVID-19 pandemic, Bestmed continued to build on the sustainable membership growth and service excellence achieved in the previous financial years. A sustainable increase in membership and a growing risk pool are important aspects that ensure the long-term survival of a medical scheme. This again was achieved during 2020 with growth of 10.6%, making it the 4th consecutive year of net principal member growth. This growth was achieved while providing exceptional service to members. Bestmed is now the 4th largest open medical scheme in South Africa, providing services to more than 220,000 lives, and is the largest open self-administered medical scheme in the country. Bestmed is ranked at the forefront of customer satisfaction in prominent industry measures and awards, and we will cover this later in the presentation. Bestmed also achieved solid financial performance, which can be summarized as follows. In 2020, Bestmed adopted a recent industry trend by purposely budgeting for a low contribution increase to give back some reserves that the scheme had built up during the COVID-19 pandemic to its members. This decision, coupled with an enhancement of benefit options and an increased claims, has resulted in a portion of the scheme's reserves being utilized to pay member healthcare claims in 2020. Total healthcare costs of 5.5 billion played a significant part in the net healthcare deficit of 173.8 million. Bestmed's investment objective of maximizing the return on its investments on a long-term basis at limited risk resulted in the scheme achieving a 5.4% annual return. Taking all income and expenditure into account, the scheme broke even for the year with a small net deficit of 3 million. I'm pleased to say the balance sheet improved marginally to 4.9 billion, and the scheme did achieve its budget objective by reducing its solvency ratio by 4% to a respectable 41.7%, bearing in mind the statutory minimum is 25%. The importance of a stable financial position has become even more significant considering the current economic conditions. Healthcare expenditure includes all payments made for claims incurred by members. The claims ratio is defined as the ratio of claims to the contributions received. So, in 2022, for every 100 Rand received from members' contributions, 94 Rand is paid to service providers for members' healthcare costs. In 2020, the industry-wide claims ratio was the lowest it had been in the past 16 years. This is largely attributable to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The unprecedented increase in claims in 2021, which was an industry-wide trend following the easing of the COVID-19 restrictions, continued into 2022 and had a negative impact on the scheme's net healthcare result. A combination of factors contributed to the increase in the 2022 claims, which all directly impacted healthcare costs. These included increased medical utilization, costs in excess of medical inflation, increased diagnostics testing, increases in registered chronic conditions, and an increase in oncology claims. How does this claim ratio affect the members' contributions? On this chart, we have the dotted line showing the claims ratio from the previous slide over the past 10 years, and the bar graph reflecting the average contribution increases over the past 10 years. Medical schemes contributions are priced on the basis of risk pooling, where the contributions charged to the members depend on a number of factors: the projected healthcare costs, administration costs, and investment income. These contributions must fund the members' healthcare claims and the running of the fund. A lower contribution increase should only be considered when there is a significant permanent change in the claims base. If a lower contribution increase is granted for a year where the claims have changed due to an external factor, for example, such as lockdown, then contributions are expected to increase in future when the claims return to their normal level. Thus, the weighted average contribution increase for 2023 of 8.5%. If we have a look at the makeup of where the 5.9 million rands worth of 5.9 billion, rands worth of contributions are used, we can see this breakdown on this chart showing that of the 5.9 million, 94%, as I said previously, is used to fund or pay for claims lodged by our members. Administration costs accounts for 7%, and then we have some smaller amounts of broker fees and the small net deficit for the year where we funded some of the claims out of the reserves. The split of the healthcare costs of 94% I will cover in a following slides. What are administration costs? These are the non-healthcare costs incurred for the day-to-day running of the scheme. One advantage of being an self-administered medical scheme is that you can manage and control your administration expenses to suit your scheme's current needs. And a reduction in these administration costs means that more of the members' contributions are available for healthcare expenditure. At 7% of risk contribution, Bestmed's administration costs are one of the lowest in the industry. Despite this, the scheme is still able to provide the excellent service levels to its members. Let's have a look at the breakdown of the 5.5 billion healthcare costs that the scheme incurred in 2022. From the chart on the screen now, one can see that the largest portion of these costs was in that of hospital group expenditure, around 46%. The 2022 split of the claims by benefit type is similar to 2021, except for the increase in specialist claims from 17 to 19%. This increase reflects the increase in procedures post the COVID-19 pandemic as members resumed visiting their specialist doctors and caught up on postponed elective procedures. And the service providers caught up on the 2 years of foregone medical inflation in their charges. What can medical schemes do to manage these healthcare costs? The Medical Schemes Act stipulates measures which medical schemes can implement to curb costs, specifically the PMB costs. One of these measures is implementing a designated service provider network, or a DSP network as it's known in the industry. For example, Bestmed can enter into a contract with a hospital group whereby its members are charged the lower negotiated rate when they use that hospital's group's facilities. The scheme has made significant progress in establishing healthcare provider networks, with approximately 83% of claims paid to network service providers. These networks are saving the scheme more than 10 million rand per month. For more information about Bestmed's DSP networks, please refer to the website or contact the Bestmed Contact Center, or refer to an email that was distributed to all members earlier this month. Managed healthcare and service provider initiatives are further ways a medical scheme can manage its healthcare costs. The scheme's managed healthcare initiatives maintain the balance between clinical and financial risk by providing the best medical care to our members within the parameters of the scheme's rules. Managed healthcare aims to provide clinically appropriate and necessary care while maintaining cost efficiencies. Through these initiatives, the focus has been reset on managing the care and not only managing the cost. Bestmed believes that the treating service provider should coordinate the members' care, and thus the scheme is committed to building a strong relationship with the service providers. If we look at the scheme's balance sheet, we see that Bestmed has reserves of 4.9 billion to fund members' claims. These reserves have grown by over 3 billion rand over the past 10 years. Investments or financial assets as at the 31st of December 2022 made up 4.6 billion of these total assets. These investments are managed by the scheme's investment committee and need to comply with the limitations imposed by Annexure B of Regulation 30 of the Medical Schemes Act. A report published in January 2023 highlights that fraud, waste and abuse continues to plague the South African medical schemes industry, costing up to 28 billion rand per year. The scheme has a responsibility to its members to ensure that members' funds are managed in a financially responsible manner for the defrayal of healthcare expenditure. The fraud, waste and abuse environment has changed in recent years and reached the stage where Bestmed actively engages and follows up on each case of suspected fraud or unprofessional conduct. The scheme has had 312 internal investigations and 79 fraud, waste and abuse cases since 2022. It can be concluded that based on the number of ongoing investigations, that fraud, waste and abuse interventions have become key to the scheme's daily operations. It is estimated that savings of over 7 million have been made to date since this intervention. What should members be doing in respect of fraud, waste and abuse? Keep track of your medical aid claim statement. This will help ensure your healthcare claims are valid. Also, check your claim to make sure the items or service you receive are on it. Know your benefits so that you do not accept services or items the scheme does not cover, which the provider offers to claim from the scheme. Please report any suspected fraud to the KPMG hotline, the details which are on the screen and will also may be found on the Bestmed website. Let's move on to the awards the scheme has received in the current year. The scheme has received a number of accolades in 2022 from 4 different organizations. The Ask Orange Index is at the forefront of service benchmarking and is the broadest, independent, and most widely referenced service excellence benchmark in South Africa. The benchmark has been tracking customer experience and the change in trends and expectations since 2001. It is one of the most referenced customer experience benchmarks in South Africa. We are proud to announce that Bestmed was ranked first in the medical aid companies category by Ask Africa Orange Index in 2022. The Board of Healthcare Funders, or the BHF, Titanium Awards recognize and acknowledge the people in the sector who work tirelessly in improving exceptional service and honors those organizations who have made an impact in various areas of healthcare. Again, we are proud of the fact that Bestmed achieved 2 Titanium Awards in 2022, one for service to membership and one for excellence in creating access to quality healthcare. The Financial Intermediary Association, or the FIA, represents more than 12,000 licensed South African financial service advisors. Their members operate in healthcare, financial planning, non-life insurance, employee benefit, and in the investment sectors. The FIA Experience Award is the most prestigious and well-known recognition event in the South African services industry. We will look at the awards that the scheme received from the South African Customer Satisfaction Index, the SA CSI, in more detail in the following slides. The South African Customer Satisfaction Index is an independent international benchmark of customer satisfaction. Bestmed was measured alongside 5 other medical schemes using a multivariate model. Weighted indices used include perceived quality and value, customer expectation and satisfaction, customer complaint incidents and handling, and customer loyalty. If we look at some of the specific SA CSR results for 2022, the combination of the weighted index across perceived quality, perceived value, and customer expectations, Bestmed achieved a score of 78.6% and is the leader in this category compared to the other 4 schemes that participated in the survey. Similarly, if we look at perceived value of a medical aid versus the perceived cost or the price consumers pay, again, Bestmed is the overall leader in this category with a score of 75.4%. When we look at the issue of complaints incident, i.e. the number of complaints and how those complaints have been handled, across the industry, Bestmed doesn't have the lowest number of complaints. However, if we look at how it handles those complaints, it is up there with the leader in terms of looking after and managing members' complaints. Let us now have a look at some of the scheme's corporate social investment initiatives. The scheme's approach to CSI is to implement initiatives that will have both an internal and external impact. This gives employees an opportunity to contribute within local communities. Bestmed has continued its relationship with Partners for Possibility. Partners for Possibility matches business leaders with school principals from local, unresourced schools. Bestmed have been associated with Partners for Possibility for the past 7 years, and in 2022 partnered with the Matseke Primary School in Attridgeville. Let's now look at some of the more recent corporate social investment initiatives that Bestmed has initiated. They invested in a healthcare pod to provide access to primary health care in underdeveloped and vulnerable communities in the Garden Route area. Bestmed has partnered with SuperSport to put together a schools hockey competition for schools in Tembisa, Mpumalanga, and portions of the Northern Cape. Bestmed has also sponsored a 25 Bestmed branded cycling team to young cycling development riders in the Eastern Cape. And finally, Bestmed donated a 22-seater bus to the Facility of Health Sciences at Nelson Mandela University in the Eastern Cape. We can now move on to corporate governance at the scheme. Desmond Smith, an appointed trustee who was an actuary by profession, sadly passed away on the 30th of January 2023. Desmond had extensive experience in the insurance industry. He also sat on a number of boards and committees and thus was well versed on corporate governance matters. He joined the Bestmed board in October 2020 as an elected trustee, and his term concluded in June 2022. He was then appointed for a further term as an appointed member at the 2022 AGM. Late in 2022, we became aware that he was struggling with ill health, which he didn't let stand in the way of his duties as a Bestmed trustee. He was always conscientious in discharging his fiduciary duties, and his invaluable contribution, as well as his dry sense of humor and friendly smile, will be sorely missed. The board then initiated a process of appointing a candidate with a suitable skill set to replace him. Following a fair and transparent recruitment process, at the board meeting in April this year, it was recommended that Dr. Leshni Shah be appointed as the appointed trustee to replace Mr. Smith. This appointment is based on her extensive practical medical, wellness, asset management, and business knowledge and experience. Dr. Shah will serve out the balance of Desmond's term of office, i.e. 3 years. We welcome Leshni to the board and look forward to working together with you. The board is now duly constituted in accordance with the Bestmed rules, comprising of 10 trustees, 5 elected trustees, and 5 appointed trustees. In terms of the current the terms of the current chairperson and vice person will end after this AGM. The chairperson and vice chairperson for the next 12 months, up to the 24 AGM, will be elected at a board meeting to be held directly after this AGM. If we have a look who the board members are, the 5 elected board members are Annelies Hartzenberg, Elmarie Marx, Professor Magdalene Slabot, Loretta Lombard, and Louise de Vries. The 5 appointed board members are Colin Mowat, Steyn du Plessis, Dr. Tumi Lagabe, Leshni Shah, Dr. Leslie Starr, and Leon Jordan. The term of office for the following 2 elected board members will lapse at the AGM in 2024. Ms. Clarette Lombard, the individual member representative, and Ms. Elmarie Marx, an employee member representative. The term of office for the following 2 appointed trustees will also come to an end at the 2024 AGM. Mr. Leon Jordan and Mr. Colin Mowat. In terms of the registered Bestmed rules, the nomination forms for the 2 elected trustees will be disseminated to Bestmed members on or before 1 November 2023. Among others, the following changes to the Bestmed rules for the 2022 financial year have been approved and registered by the CMS. The main substantive rules changed were basically children are covered as child dependents until the age of 24 years, the addition of provisions relating to the Papaya Act, and the change in the quorum of number of members for the annual general meeting to bring the scheme's rules in line with the CMS's model rules. In April 2021, the CMS advised Bestmed that 2 member complaints had been received against the scheme. The first complaint in March 2021 was from member Dr. Late. The complaint was that Bestmed was muzzling its members to avoid member-driven rule changes by holding the view that Rule 32.2 cannot be invoked for the submission of ballots, and that the 2020 AGM was handled unacceptably. The second complaint received in April 2021 was from member Mr. A.M. Lagrange, and it was against Bestmed for the way it conducted the 2020 virtual AGM and the handing of the 10 motions submitted at that AGM. Bestmed responded to the CMS in respect of both complaints, and the CMS ruled on the complaints, and both rulings were largely in favor of the scheme. Both Dr. Late and Mr. Lagrange subsequently submitted appeals to the CMS against its ruling. In February 2023, the CMS ruled in favor of Bestmed in both Dr. Late's and Mr. Lagrange's appeals. The CMS's appeals committee found that in Dr. Late's case, he had not interpreted Rule 32.2 correctly, and in Mr. Lagrange's case, the CMS appeals committee dismissed it on the grounds of appeal. If we look now at the strategy and the way forward for Bestmed, the CMS circular for 27 of 2023 reports that at the end of 22, there were only 71 registered medical schemes, 16 of which were open schemes and 55 closed schemes. Thus, it's very evident that the medical aid industries continues to consolidate with the number of schemes decreasing over the past years. The number of beneficiaries covered by medical schemes has remained stagnant over the past decade at around 9 million. To be sustainable going forward, the scheme must remain competitive and successfully navigate through a highly regulated environment. The scheme's key strategic goals remain operational excellence, membership growth, healthcare sector leadership, and innovation. The 2022 strategic focus was on increasing value for money for members through competitively priced option, releasing some reserves to the members, and improving member experience. This has resulted in a 10.6% growth in membership in 2022. To continue the scheme's commitment to quality personally yours service, engagement with our stakeholders is central to the scheme's operations and business. The main objectives of these engagements are to gain an awareness, understanding of any concerns or opportunities in the stakeholder community, and to identify any measures needed to manage these effectively while building mutually rewarding relationships. Stakeholder engagements also ensure the scheme reaches its goals of greater transparency and good corporate governance, as well as creating opportunities for stakeholder involvement. What does the future hold for Bestmed? Bestmed continues to monitor the developments in the private healthcare industry in response to the planned implementation of National Health Insurance, or NHI. The scheme is participating in the NHI process via the Board of Healthcare Funders, the BHF. We believe that attaining the government's aspiration of universal access to primary health care for the country cannot be achieved without the support and consultation of the private healthcare players, including medical schemes. At the second Presidential Health Summit held recently, the President affirmed that NHR would be implemented and tasked the summit with reviewing the implementation of the interventions that were agreed to during the 2018 summit, and to evaluate the readiness to implement NHR. Various stakeholders are of the view that progress made with implementing NHR has been limited due to the impact of COVID-19 on the country's health system. Recently, the NHR bill, which was introduced to Parliament originally in 2019, was debated and approved by the National Assembly. It will now be considered in the National Council of Provinces. The scheme has every interest in seeing universal health coverage in South Africa, but it must be sustainable and be provided in a way that best uses the scarce resources of the state. NHR, as it's conceived in the approved NHR bill, is not that. Bestmed will continue to actively reposition itself as a new generation healthcare business through innovation in various areas. The scheme will continue to enhance its product offering, increasing its service provider network, brand awareness, and remain the preferred choice of members and healthcare advisors. Caring for our employees, our heartbeats, remains crucial. The reintegration of back into the office, which commenced in January 2022, of the heartbeats has proved successful, and there has been minimal interruption to operations and service levels. The South African private healthcare industry has undergone considerable change over the past few years. Escalating healthcare inflation and costs, a declining and aging membership, the impact of the global pandemic, and a growing disease burden are impacting the medical schemes industry. National health insurance continues to dominate conversations about how best to meet the needs of the healthcare consumers with new insights and fresh perspective. The coming year will be increasingly challenging, and constructive and practical solutions will have to be implemented to ensure the future sustainability of the industry. Finally, in appreciation, I would like to thank the members for their continued support and loyalty. Without you, we wouldn't have a medical scheme. I would like to also thank our healthcare advisors or brokers for continuing to entrust your clients to our business. To the Heartbeats, for your exceptional hard work and dedication to deliver the personally yours promise to our members, despite the challenging work circumstances over the past few years. And finally, to my fellow board members, thank you for your continued support, cooperation, wisdom, and commitment to Bestmed.
Thank you very much, Colin. Ladies and gentlemen, we have opened the telephone lines for you to let us know if you have any questions. We've not received any questions via our other platforms, but we ask you to please bear with us for at least a minute or so that we can find out if there are any telephonic questions coming through. Ladies and gentlemen, still no calls. So if we can maybe just give another half a minute. Kindly be reminded that you're welcome to still phone even if we proceed with the next agenda item, and then we'll handle those questions in the next Q&A session. We are validating a call that is coming through. We have a call, ladies and gentlemen. We can proceed. Thank you, colleague. We are
Hello.
ready. Good morning.
So can I ask my question, Chairperson? Good morning.
Good
May I
morning,
pose
sir.
my question now, please? Thank you. Can I pose my question now, please?
You can, sir. You are welcome to proceed.
Yeah. Thank you.
You can, sir. You are welcome to proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson, for a very comprehensive report. My question refers to the financial statements of 2021 and 2022. When I look at the various channels, I notice that the PACE channel has performed very well with a very high surplus. When I look at the various channels, I notice that the PACE channel has performed very well with a very high surplus. Also, I know that the solvency ratio is 41.73%, which is above the norm of 25%. Also, in light of these two submissions, I'd like to know if the levy, the co-payments that members are asked to pay, can be reduced or taken away, because this is a financial burden to older members, and the co-payment is quite high. So can that be addressed? And I'd like serious consideration to reduce this co-payment in light of strong reserves and the healthy PACE channel's performance. Thank you, Chairperson.
Do you want to handle it, Leo?
I can.
Thank you, sir. Jess and Leo.
Okay.
So the question referred to our financial results,
Sure.
and then the question about the co-payments. So
Should I go first, or are you going to go?
I'll go for it, Leo. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, member. I think very pertinent question indeed. Let me answer it in a couple of ways. I think, first of all, I think it's important for members to realize that, by and large, the scheme is a cost taker. We take costs mainly from what the providers charge. That's on the one hand. The other big cost driver for us is the utilization, i.e. what members require. Those two elements determine what the cost requirement is to fund the scheme. So let's accept that that's the one model. So once that has happened, where do we get our funding from? From contributions. Now, to the extent that you have contributions that can meet that requirement of that cost base, then it's a happy balance. To the extent that it's slanted towards either the contributions is lower than what you receive, what the cost requirement is, then you use the reserves, which is what we've done for the last 2 years, 2021 and 2021, because of the excess reserves that we had coming out of the year 2020 with COVID. We deliberately, in our product design bled out. In other words, instead of increasing our contribution increase by what the industry average was, we deliberately made sure we increased it by lower than what the average was. So if you look at just the last 2 cycles, we increased our contribution increase by about 2 percentage points below what the average was in the industry. So we did that because we wanted to do what? Reduce the reserves. Let me also say this. The only other way we can reduce the reserves and give the members the benefit of high reserves is 2 ways. Because we are not a not-for-profit, the one way we do that is we can give you a lower than average increase, which is what we did the last 2 years. The other way that we can do it, we can enrich the product benefits, which we did. I think 2021, we enriched our product options by up to 85 million, which you generally don't see in the industry right now. But having said all of that, what we also did in our product design, because again, I said to you, there's a utilization, there's also cost taking that we do. In our product design, we then look, what are the pain points of members? Clearly, one of the pain points is core payments. In fact, in the last round, leading up to the 2023 and even the 2022, we identified core payments as one of the pain points. Among other things, we had a deliberate move towards removing those core payments. And we've come quite a way in terms of removing those core payments. We will continue to do that. So let me say this, we take note of your concern. And to the extent that we can balance, again, the cost, utilization, contributions, reserves, to the extent that there's surplus that we can bleed out to the members, we then use the benefit design process to be able to give you that benefit, either through lower co-payments, enriched benefits, increased limits, and all of that. So let me say this to the member, we will take that on board, and as we are finalizing our benefit design, which will determine our product offering and our increases or contributions for next year, we will take the point into context. And I apologize, it's a long answer, but it's a very important one, given where we are in terms of our finances. Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much for posing that question, and thank you, Leo. Ladies and gentlemen, we just have one other statement from a member, from Mr. Gideon van Aarde, that said, I would like to applaud Leo, his management team and Board of Trustees of Bestmed for yet another excellent set of results. Thanks for a well-run and governed scheme, as evident from the presentation today and the various external surveys conducted and awards received. Keep it up. Thank you very much for that comment, sir.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've not received any further calls, so we will now proceed. Jasogan Chetty will present the financial statements and auditor's report for the year ended 31 December 2022. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Madeleine. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to once again present the financial performance for the year 2022. Let's have a quick glance of factors that affected not only Bestmed, but the economy as a whole. Unemployment numbers were up, fluctuating fuel prices, naturally the subdued growth as a consequence of that, load shedding, the COVID-19 catch-up, and the weakening rand. And of course, factor that we all largely affected by, the Ukrainian war and the Russian war. Just having a look at the financials specifically, one had to have a look at the year-on-year and absolute terms. Risk contribution income increased by 8.3%. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is against the 3.9% increase that we had in the prior year, as well as a 10% growth in membership. Naturally, the increase is not reflective of that growth plus the increase, given the fact that more members have chosen to buy down into cheaper options as a result of economic difficulties. Relevant healthcare expenditure, which is our claims, increased year on year by 12.6%, and the claims ratio increased from 90.7% in the prior year to 94.3% in 2022. Again, one had to look at the non-healthcare cost year on year. That's the cost of managing the scheme, increased from 8.4% in the prior year to 8.7% in 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, this needs to be considered against the better than expected membership increase as well as the 3.9% increase year on year. One had to look at the financial position summary, as previously referred to by the chairperson. The balance sheet still reflects quite healthily at 4.9 billion in terms of total assets, comprising of non-current and current assets, and then members' funds on the funds and liability side of 3.4 billion, non-current liabilities of 40 million, and current liabilities of 1.5 billion, still representative of a fairly healthy solvency of 41.73, significantly above the 25%. Again, the solvency has shifted as a consequence of giving back to members by lower increases. We have to look at the income statement, the statement of comprehensive income as we refer to it. Risk contribution income of 5.8 billion, relevant healthcare expenditure of 5.5 billion, resulting in a gross healthcare of 335 million. Non-healthcare costs, as previously referred to, and then a net healthcare loss of 173.7 million. Ladies and gentlemen, whilst we incurred a net healthcare loss, again, that was as a consequence of lower increases, which have then cascaded down into the net healthcare result. Other income and expenses, reflective of investment returns, given the volatility in the markets, we still did better than expected, resulting in an almost break-even point of 3.3 million on the net loss line. Taking into consideration other comprehensive income, resulting in a total comprehensive income of a positive 3.8 million. One had to look at then member funds, the analysis of what makes up members' funds on the 3.3 billion from 2022. We looked at investments of 3.5 billion, personal medical savings accounts, which is essentially your money, members, which we manage on your behalf, of 1 billion, cash and cash equivalents of 50.6 billion, and other assets of 244 million. Considering the liabilities, now the liabilities which the scheme holds predominantly results in claims in a provision referred to as the IBNR, then reconciling back to total member funds of 3.3 billion, with a solvency, as mentioned previously, of 41.73%. One then had to look at the cash cover of risk benefits, which is representative of the cash holdings which can accommodate claims. We then look at it at 7.8 months versus 8.7 months from the prior year. Again, as a consequence of lower increases, resulting in lower cash holdings and therefore resulting in a lower cash cover of risk benefits. Still in a healthy position. One then looked at the assets on investment, slightly up from last year, 3.5 billion, return achieved over 10 years of 7.1%. Ladies and gentlemen, again, reflective of the volatility in the markets, with CPI at 5.2% average for 2022 against 2021's 5%. One then had to consider the real return over the period now, which is effectively the return over 10 years versus the CPI, 1.9%. Yes, not necessarily attractive, but signs of the market. The key consideration, however, is the real return since inception of the portfolio, which is 2.8%, which is significantly better than the return over 10 years, and in line, slightly lower, obviously, than the expectation of 3% over inflation. But again, the hopes are that when the economy turns and investment markets return to previous levels, we will reach those expected levels. We then looked at how Bestmed did relative to the other medical schemes in the industry in terms of the information that was available to us. You can see comparatively we celebrate the growth, and congratulations to my colleagues and the rest of the business in making sure that we were able to attract new members to the scheme, 10.6% year on year. We then looked at the solvency ratio on prior years. Bestmed still in a healthy position of 41.73% relative to 45.68% in the prior year. Also reference to the higher claims experienced in the current year, but still very healthy relative to other schemes in the marketplace. If we looked at the claims ratio, again 94.3%. And as I mentioned, it may reflect as being high, but you've got to take it in consideration with the claims versus the revenue line, the contribution income. So naturally, a lower contribution increase, claims propensity remains the same, will be reflected reflective rather of a higher claims ratio. And then if we looked at the healthcare cost as a percentage of risk contributions, happy to state that Bestmed is still by far one of the lowest in the industry for self-administered scheme at 8.66% relative to the other schemes as represented. If we then looked at the net healthcare result, unfortunately, given the state of the economy, in the prior year, you could see that most of the schemes in 2022 incurred losses below the line. Bestmed at 173.7 million, still relatively lower to other medical aids within the industry, but again, not synonymous to the scheme. We'll then look at moving on to the adoption of the 22 financial statements. Members are required to vote. This will be done later on in the meeting. We'll also then look to the appointment of the auditors for 2023. Again, you'll be required to vote. We, as the members and the board, recommend that the the board and the audit committee recommends the appointment of Deloitte for the next financial year. Ladies and gentlemen, that in summary is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jess. Ladies and gentlemen, we have another opportunity for questions. We again have not received any questions in the interim, but you are welcome to phone the phone lines and we'll address your question. So if you'll please bear with us and please give a minute or so for questions to come through. It does take a few seconds for it to come through to stage. Thank you. We've not received any calls at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't received any calls. In the interim, I'd like to read another positive comment from Ms. Ferreira. She said, I appreciate the additional reserves being translated into lower contributions where all members can benefit, all in capitals. So, Ms. Ferreira, thank you very much for that comment. And we do really try to, at all times, benefit our members. Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't received any other calls. We will now proceed. Please remember that, again, you can still call us. We will have a third and last question and answer session after Leo's presentation. So we will proceed, and Leo will now present the proposed amendments to the trustee remuneration for 2023-2024. Thank you, Leo.
Thanks, Madeleine. And a good morning to all our members present today. Good morning to our trustees, our auditors, and of course, a representative from CMS. My role today is walk you through the proposed amendments to the trustee remuneration policy today. So just in the way of context for this submission that we're doing, I'd like to draw your attention to three clauses within the policy. Clause 4.2c, which states that any amendments to the policy needs to be approved by the board and thereafter brought before the AGM. And then the clause 4.2d states that any amendments that relate to that change, to that policy, needs to be submitted to both CMS and the members 21 days prior to the AGM. And then clause 4.3 states that any changes to trustees' fees, which is captured in Annexure A, needs to be voted upon by members. So if we look at the next slide, on the 18th of May, in line with clause 4.2c as stated in the previous slide, the board approved the amendments to be made to the trustee remuneration policy. And then, of course, today is when then the members are going to look at that amendment. Specific reference is made to the Annexure A of the policy. In line again with clause 4.2d, on the 1st of June, this information was disseminated to both CMS and the members. You recall that clause 4.2d states that information that relates to any of these amendments to the policy needs to reach members at least 21 days before that AGM. So that 1st of June reconciles with that. The information that was disseminated is in three parts. The one is the proposed amendments to the policy itself, then the policy with the accepted changes, and then the last document is the explanatory note that talks through those proposed changes. And then, of course, today talks to clause 4.3 that says any changes to Annexure A, which relates to fees, needs to be presented, put to the vote at the AGM, which is what today is about. So, in the way of context, one needs to just talk about changes to any policy that relates to trustee remuneration. It's important that we just take a look at what trustees have to do for the scheme. Now we know that, and we've heard the chairperson talk about how increasingly competitive the industry continues to be. The regulation is very tough. The industry continues to be uncertain. And this is the environment within which the trustees have to discharge their fiduciary duty. They have to provide oversight over the direction of the scheme, provide cover in terms of governance, make sure compliance is right, implementation of strategic direction, making sure that risk management is done, and they have to make decisions. And these decisions basically not only bring risk to themselves as individuals, but also to the scheme. So it therefore makes sense that when trustees devote their time to execute this fiduciary duties, that context is taken into account. So if you think about it, that responsibility, the risk that they assume, the exposure, the expertise that they bring onto the table, and of course the time that they devote to the scheme needs to be taken into account when one talks about trustee remuneration. It's also important that whatever fees or trustee remuneration that they're given, that it's comparable with peers or same-sized or relatively the same size schemes so that it's fair. Because you don't want your trustees that discharge this responsibility in the way that they have, which you've seen based on the results, that they're actually unfairly remunerated. So how do we then make sure that the remuneration is fair? The only way you could do that is basically by doing benchmarks. So to be able to do benchmarks, what was important to us is to take information that, first of all, is credible, secondly, is publicly available so that members can easily access that information. So to do that, what we looked at was the CMS annual report for 2021, which was published now in October. But we also participated in a survey that Willis Towers Watson was doing around trustee remuneration. Now, that survey that Willis Towers Watson was doing focused on a cohort of 8 trust schemes, which included then Bestmed. So in terms of analyzing the CMS information, we decided we'd stay with the same cohort that the Willis Towers Watson survey looked at, which is the 8 different schemes. To be able to do the survey, we looked at 4 dimensions. The first one is total trustee remuneration. The second one is average trustee remuneration. And then the third is the chairperson's remuneration, and then the vice chairperson's remuneration. So those are 4 dimensions that we looked at in terms of benchmarking to see where Bestmed is positioned vis-a-vis that cohort that we spoke about. So if you look at the next slide, that starts to talk to the outcomes of the survey. Now, I've said to you, the CMS report is a 2021 report that was published now in October. So The 22 data for all the other schemes is not available. It will be available later on this year. So what we've had to do is take the 2021 information and then make an assumption that those schemes would have applied a 5% increase from the 2021 to get what the 2022 equivalence would be. Now, what does that mean? We know that the 2022 average inflation was about, I think it was about close to 6%. Could be slightly higher than 6%, but we conservatively assumed 5% for all the schemes. And for Bestmed, as you know, at the last AGM, trustees, members voted that the increase in trustee remuneration could be 5%. So we have the actual, so we've imposed that. Those then results give you what you're seeing. You'll see that the dark blue bar talks to the 2021, then the light blue talks to 2022. You will see that, again, Bestmed is positioned on the bottom half in this cohort. Now, it's not important necessarily that the numbers is an exact number, because what we're looking at is less the exact numbers, but more the relative positioning of Bestmed. So when you look at total remuneration, you'll see that Bestmed is positioned bottom half of that cohort. If we then look at the average trustee remuneration, now what we're doing here in this slide, we've taken the total remuneration that was paid by the scheme. We've taken the number of trustees, we've done the math, divided that out to get the average amount. Again, we did the same thing because we didn't have the 2022 information, so we did that 5% adjustment to make sure that it's in line. Once we've done that, we've also then, for Bestmed specifically, now, unfortunately, the CMS data doesn't take into account if a trustee serves for 3 months or part of that calendar year. The CMS data basically says if a trustee served for any, whether it's 2, 4, or 5 months, to count that trustee as one. If another trustee then comes in to serve the balance of that term, the CMS information counts that as another trustee. So if you look at the Bestmed information and you look at our AFS, you'll see that there were 12 trustees that went through our books because of the movement. Chairperson has spoken to some of it. But to be able to be accurate, what we've done is we've calculated what the annual equivalence of those trustees are. So if 2 trustees, one serves 4 months, the other serves 8, we count that as one trustee because it's 1 year. So you'll see that the information that if you check the CMS information, you might see 12 for Bestmed, but it actually is 10 in terms of year annual equivalence. So those are the adjustments that we've done. And you'll see that when we then divide the total remuneration by the number of trustees, you'll see where Bestmed is positioned. Again, both in 2021 and in 2022, Bestmed sits, again, bottom half, second from the bottom. It talks to where the remuneration of trustees sits in this cohort that we're looking at. So that's the information from the CMS perspective. Now, if you look at the Willis Towers Watson information, now let me just orientate you before I go into the actual results. The chart you're looking at, if you look at the light blue bar, that talks to the average in that if for this cohort for the chairperson, if that's the first part. The dark blue part talks to the lower quartile in terms of that cohort. And then the gray bar talks to the upper quartile. You'll also see a purple dot, which has a rand value on top of that. That is then where Bestmed is positioned. You'll see again, we've split that into the chairperson, vice chairperson, and then a trustee. Important to note that the average trustee on this page doesn't include the chairperson's fees and the vice chairperson's fees. Now, to talk through the results, you'll see that clearly from a chairperson perspective, the chairperson's remuneration is below the average of this cohort. It's actually marginally above the lower quartile and definitely way below the upper quartile. The vice chair, on the other hand, is slightly above the average in this cohort in terms of vice chairpersons. It is also above the lower quartile, but it's below the upper quartile. You'll also see in terms of just the trustees, again, stripped out from the chairperson and the vice chairperson, you'll see that Bestmed trustees are below the average in this cohort. They are slightly above the lower quartile, definitely below the upper quartile. So if you look at the CMS information and the Willis Towers, the message is consistent. It says that generally the relative positioning of Bestmed trustee fees sits below the average place. So now you could ask, if you look at Bestmed and compare it to other consideration, for instance, CPI, where does that sit? The next page talks to that. What we did is we said, let's find credible information where we can look at what the historic average CPI has been for the last 4 years, and then match that against what the Bestmed trustee remuneration increases have been. So the page that you see, the column on the right-hand side shows you, and this is information, again, publicly available from Stats SA on their publication that was published on March. I think it's P0141, if members want to reference that information. That information then shows us what the CPI has been and historic information on that. You will see that if you then take the average over the period, which is the 4 years, you'll see that the average is 4.7% year on year. You'll also see Bestmed in terms of the column that's in the middle, that Bestmed increases track inflation. While it might be different year on year, but actually the average over the period is exactly the same. There's a 0.03 difference in the two. What does this mean? This means that Bestmed trustee remuneration has not in real terms increased. It's basically tracked inflation. So in real terms, there hasn't been an increase, which also means that there hasn't been a correction in terms of the relative positioning that we spoke about in the two surveys that we did in terms of CMS and Willis Towers Watson. So you wouldn't have adjusted that. You'll agree with me that in the ideal environment, an increase going into the future should do two things. The one, it should be able to make sure that we are not falling short of inflation, i.e. should not be below the CPI. We all know that inflation is above 7% right now. So that's the first in the ideal environment that should happen. Secondly, there should be an opportunity to make sure that we move Bestmed's trustee remuneration fees from the relative low positioning, certainly in this cohort of 8, to somewhere close to the middle. So there should be a little bit of an adjustment over and above the inflation to counter that. Now, if we agree with that context, this talks to why the recommended proposed increase in trustee remuneration sits at, which is the next slide. So the proposal is that the trustee remuneration fees, as captured in Annexure A of the trustee remuneration policy, is increased by 8.9, which is in line with the contribution increases that was applied to members on the 1st of January 2023. That, ladies and gentlemen, concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leo. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have our third and final opportunity for you to pose questions. In the interim, we have received a statement that I would like to read to you. We have received the statement before Leo's presentation concluded, so he has addressed some of the information in his presentation, but I'm going to read the statement nevertheless, and then Leo perhaps just ask you to reiterate some of the information that you presented. 100%. So the statement was from Mr. Fredericks, and he said, I find the increase in trustees significant. I find the increase for trustees significant in the light of the current challenging financial environment and with current increases by companies for their board members and even increases for unions in the different segments. It is unacceptable. Leo, so
Yeah.
if I can perhaps just ask you to comment.
Sure, man. Thank you. And I think it's a valid comment. This talks to, first of all, the kind of debates as executives, we propose this increase to the trustees. The trustees also echoed some of the sentiment in a way to say the timing is wrong. So let's accept that in itself, the 8.9, if you look at it cold, it is a high number given where we are. It is. Inflation sits slightly above 7%. So if you look at 8.9 and you look at it cold, it's a high number. So let's accept that. I think what we're trying to do with this increase is that two things. It talks to my second last slide. What we're trying to do is, because the positioning of the trustee remuneration for Bestmed sits lower than like-sized schemes. So you have a legacy problem. You need to address that legacy. And how do you address the legacy? It means that you have to find an opportunity to increase that trustee remuneration by slightly higher than what you would otherwise. And that talks to my second to last slide that says we need to do two things with this increase. The one is we must keep up with inflation. And if we assume that inflation is at about 7.2, 7.3%, it says that the increase couldn't be below 7.2%. That's the first thing. But if we're addressing the legacy, which I've demonstrated in the slides, that we sit below the bottom half, we're about the bottom half, and a size scheme as big as ours shouldn't be there. We're saying we need to then adjust that, which is the additional sort of 2 odd percentage points. Let me also say this. One cannot just look at the number in isolation in the year. One has to, again, reiterate the risk that the trustees assume when they discharge this responsibility that they do. The fact that the scheme has continued to grow year on year, the reserves are healthy, it's through their guidance, through their determination, through their spending time. They also have to be somewhat, the opportunity cost of their time needs to be rewarded. So we need to be cognizant of it. Also the risk that they assume, and I spoke to this in my third slide, that they could be held personally liable in their personal capacities for decisions taken in the boardroom. Now I know you're not talking about that, but you're talking about the absolute number, but this is the context through which we then get to the point where we are proposing 8.9%. I know, isolated, look at it cold, it's a high number. But because we have legacy that we're trying to address, adjusting inflation and then taking 2% to adjust, at some point it needs to be done. We believe that the way to do it is do it incrementally, which is what we're doing this year. You would have seen my second to last slide. You spoke about how we've tracked inflation. So if you look at it the last couple of years, we haven't been able to do this adjustment of the legacy. Some point it has to be done. In the ideal environment, we do it once off, I put a 20%, 25%, bring it to the center, and then stay with inflation. But we can't do that because we recognize that it's a high number. So that's the comment I'd like to add to that presentation, man. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leo. We have received a call as well. I've been advised. Can we please proceed?
Thank you. Is that my turn?
We can hear you, sir. You can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Mr. Muntami, 1678523. I do hear clearly Mr. Leo's motivation for the increase in the policy, remuneration policy. But I think I want to support Mr. Dion Fredericks, who talks about a tough economic condition that we are facing, the inflation environment, and also medical inflation. And I think the policy should reflect what is reasonable. And in my view, and I hope I get the support of fellow members, that it should be in line with inflation, which is between the targeted range of 4 and 6%. If you look about 8.9 with 9%, that's about a 50% increase from the 4 to 6% range. So my proposal would be for an inflation-linked increase in a tough economic environment. Thank you.
I'm struggling to hear him.
Thank you, sir. Leo, did you get the question? It was a statement. The member just also supported the previous statement
Sure.
that the increase should be more in line with inflation.
Can I just add something, if I may, members? And I appreciate where members are. And I think we can do our best in terms of putting benchmarks, showing you where Bestmed sits. We can make our best presentations about the risks they assume. But ultimately, we give the members the opportunity to vote. And this is where you have an opportunity to say to us, no, we do not agree. So I encourage members, and this is not me being saying we won't listen. We hear your comments. And as I've acknowledged it before in my opening comments, that 8.9 is high if you look at it in isolation. But we're dealing with legacy that we're addressing in that context. All I want to say is members then have the opportunity to tell us through their vote whether yes or no. And we encourage members to then exercise their right to then inform us in terms of where they sit with this. I think I'd like to leave it there, Matt, if I may.
Thank you, Leo. We have received feedback from Mr. Munsami as well that said he agrees with Dion with the increase in line with inflation of 4 to 6%.
Yeah.
But I think you've addressed it very comprehensively.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leo. Members, then, ladies and gentlemen, we have received another comment. It states for Leo, please. And it says, Leo's high-level systemic explanation of the optimizing of benefits is much appreciated. However, at the next AGM, I would like to see the same depth of analysis on benefits reserves and how they are structured, as we are seeing here on the trustee remuneration. So I think in essence, it's just a compliment to you, Leo, for going in depth with the analysis. And I think just a request that we do the same with reserves, etc., etc.
Sure.
So thank you very much for your comments, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we've not received any other calls or comments, so we will now proceed to the agenda item where you can vote on the various resolutions. And I'm just going to repeat some of the information that I shared with you in the beginning of the AGM, just for in case you missed it. So the first thing that you have to do when we open the platform for voting is to please refresh your page. And I'll show you just now exactly what it looks like when you have to refresh. And then you click on the blue Click to Vote button. By clicking on the Click to Vote button, it will open the voting page, as you can see on your screen. And then the 3 items available or there for voting will be displayed on your screen. These include the adoption of the annual financial statements for the year ended 31 December 2022, inclusive of the auditor's report, as presented by Jasogan Chetty. Then also the appointment of the external auditors in accordance with Rule 25.1. And from Jess's presentation, you'll remember that the proposal is for Deloitte to be appointed. And then the approval of the proposed increase in trustee remuneration for 2023-2024 of 8.9% that Leo just presented to us. So we will allow 15 minutes for voting. If there are any technical glitches, we will allow more time. But we've tested the platform and it is smooth. After that, we'll also need 10 minutes for our internal audit team to just verify and confirm the results. So when the voting page opens and members cannot access the page, refresh the page and try again, please. And you'll see there on your screen, so this refresh button is the small circle on the top left-hand page of your screen. It's part of your address bar. And then our chairman will present the results as soon as the voting and the internal audit verification has concluded. So with that, members and gentlemen, we have opened the voting and you can please proceed to voting. Thank you very much.
Sometimes there's no one else who loves me like you used to. Sometimes we're not ourselves. There's no one I can turn to. And I know all the feelings that we shared are in the past. And I know your relationships are never meant to last. And I'll take some time, but I'll be alright. We're moving on. We're moving on. I know times are tough, but I've had enough. We're moving on. We're moving on. We're moving on.
It's been just over 30 minutes since we adjourned this AGM to allow for member voting, which has been successfully concluded and verified by internal audit. And I would now like to reconvene the AGM and to announce the results of the member voting. The first item voted on was the adoption of the annual financial statements for the year ended 31 December 2022. We had 62 votes for and 0 votes against, so we got 100% approval for that resolution. Resolution number 2, the appointment of Deloitte as the external auditors for the financial year ended December 2023. We have 61 votes for and 0 votes against. So again, we have 100% for, and the resolution will be adopted. The final resolution was for the approval of the proposed 8.9 increase in trustee remuneration. We have 38 votes for, 19 votes against. So there is 66% in favor, 33% against. So again, resolution number 3 is also approved. Thank you very much for participating in the voting. If I look at the agenda, we have now covered all the items recorded on the agenda. All it leaves me now is to say thank you for attending today's AGM. A big thank you to the Bestmed and technical teams who brought you this virtual meeting today. And having covered all the agenda items, I hereby close the meeting. Have a good day.